The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of Arrowhead Stadium as Travis Kelce emerged from the Big Slick weekend charity event, his mind still buzzing from the successful fundraiser that had just raised over $3 million Children's Mercy Hospital. The June heat was oppressive, typical for Kansas City summers, and Travis was looking forward to getting into his air-conditioned car and heading home. But something made him stop. Across the street from the stadium, positioned strategically where exiting event attendees would see him, stood an elderly man behind a small folding table. The table was covered with an array of handmade flower arrangements, simple but beautiful bouquets of roses, carnations, and baby's breath, each one carefully wrapped in clear cellophane with small ribbon bows. The man himself was what caught Travis's attention. Despite the heat, he wore a faded military jacket over a clean white t-shirt, and his gray hair was combed neatly beneath a Vietnam veteran baseball cap that had seen better days. His posture was ramrod straight, military bearing evident even in his advanced, but his weathered hands shook slightly as he arranged and rearranged his flowers. Travis had participated in enough military appreciation events to recognize a veteran when he saw one, and something about this man's quiet dignity tugged at his heart. The chief's tight end glanced around and noticed that despite the hundreds of people streaming out of the charity event, most of them affluent Kansas City residents who could easily afford the man's modest flowers, very few were stopping to buy anything. "Travis, great event tonight," a voice called out. Travis turned to see Dr. Patricia Williams, the chief of pediatric oncology at Children's Mercy, approaching with her husband. "Dr. Williams, always a pleasure," Travis replied, but his attention kept drifting back to the flower vendor across the street. "That gentleman has been there every weekend the past month," Dr. Williams said, following Travis's gaze. "Frank Mitchell, one of our volunteers, mentioned seeing him at various events around the city, always selling flowers, always in that same military jacket. Has anyone talked to him?" Travis asked. "A few people have bought flowers, but he's very polite, very reserved, never asks for more than the price he's posted. $5 for small bouquets, $10 for the larger one." Travis excused himself from the conversation and began walking across the street. As he approached, he could see the care that had gone into each arrangement. These weren't just flowers thrown together. They were artistic, thoughtfully composed, the work of someone who understood beauty and took pride in his craft. "Evening, sir," Travis said as he reached the table. Frank Mitchell looked up, and Travis saw eyes that held experience, both joy and sorrow etched into the lines of his face. "Good evening, young man. These flowers are fresh, cut this morning from my garden. $5 and $10, depending on the size you're interested in." His voice carried the slight rasp of age, but remained strong and clear. There was no recognition in his eyes of who Travis was, which was refreshing for the NFL star who was used to being recognized everywhere he went in Kansas City. "They're beautiful," Travis said, genuinely meaning it. "Did you grow all of these yourself?" "Yes, sir. My wife taught me how to garden when I came back from Vietnam in '71. Said it would be good therapy for me, help me readjust." Frank's hands moved gently over the flowers as he spoke. "She was right about that. Still is good therapy." 44 years later, Travis picked up one of the larger arrangements, a stunning combination of red roses and white carnations. "This is incredible work. You're an artist." Frank's weathered face broke into a small smile. "Rose always said I had an eye for it. She's the real artist in the family that paints watercolors that would take your breath away." "Rose is your wife?" 52 years this October," Frank said with evident pride. "Met her at a USO dance when I was on leave in 1973. Took me 3 months to work up the courage to ask her out, and she said yes on the condition that I'd let her teach me to dance properly." Travis found himself genuinely charmed by this man's story. "And she taught you to garden too?" "Among other things. Rose has a way of bringing out the best in people. Always has." Frank's expression grew thoughtful. "These days, she's teaching me patience more than anything else." Something in Frank's tone suggested there was more to that story, but Travis didn't want to pry. Instead, he reached into his wallet and pulled out a $100 bill. "I'll take 10 of your best arrangements," Travis said. Frank's eyes widened. "Son, that's way too much money. Even 10 large arrangements would only be $100, and I don't have 10 large ones made up." "Then make it simple," Travis said with a smile. "I'll take everything you have here and keep the change." "I can't accept that," Frank protested, his military pride evident. "I don't take charity." Travis had expected this response. He'd encountered proud veterans before, men and women who would rather struggle than accept what they perceived as handout. "It's not charity, sir. It's business. I have a large house, and I'm hosting a dinner party next week for my teammates and their wives. These flowers will be perfect for decorating. You're providing a service, and I'm paying for quality work." It wasn't entirely true. Travis hadn't planned any dinner party, but he could see Frank considering the proposition. "Well," Frank said slowly, "if you're sure you can use them all?" "Absolutely sure," Travis confirmed. As Frank carefully packed the flower arrangements into boxes he'd brought for transport, Travis noticed the man's hand trembling more noticeably when he thought he wasn't being observed. The tremor seemed to be more than just the normal shakiness of age. "Mr. Mitchell," Travis said, as Frank handed him the last box, "can I ask what brings you out here selling flowers? I mean, besides the obvious." Frank was quiet for a long moment, his hands resting on the now empty table. "Rose needs some medical care that our insurance doesn't fully cover. These flowers help bridge the gap between what we have and what we need." The simple honesty statement hit Travis harder than he'd expected. Here was a man who had served his country, who had built a life and a marriage spanning over 5 decades, reduced to selling handmade flower arrangements on street corners to afford his wife's medical care. "What kind of medical care, if you don't mind me asking?" Frank looked up at Travis, studying his face as if trying to determine whether this stranger could be trusted with the truth. "Rose has Alzheimer's," Frank said quietly. "Started showing signs about 3 years ago. Got diagnosed officially last year. The medications that might slow it down, the special care she needs, Medicare covers some of it, but not enough." Travis felt his heart sink. He'd heard about the devastating costs of Alzheimer's care, how it could bankrupt even middle-class families. "I'm sorry," Travis said. "That must be incredibly difficult." "The hardest part isn't the money," Frank said, beginning to fold up his table. "The hardest part is watching the woman you love forget who you are piece by piece. Some days she knows me. Some days I'm a stranger in her house. But I made a promise 52 years ago, in sickness and in health, and I intend to keep it." As Frank packed up his simple operation, Travis found himself thinking about his own life, the millions of dollars he made playing a game, the luxury and comfort he took for granted, the problems that seemed significant until he met someone facing real challenges. Quiet dignity. "Mr. Mitchell," Travis said as the veteran prepared to leave, "would it be okay if I came by sometime this week? I'd like to meet Rose and maybe see your garden." Frank looked surprised by the request. "You're welcome any time, son. We live at 1247 Elm Street, just off 39. Rose would enjoy the company. She doesn't get many visitors these days." As Travis watched Frank Mitchell walk away, pushing a small cart with his folding table and empty boxes, he made a decision that would change both their lives forever. But what he didn't yet know was that Frank's situation was far more complex and heartbreaking than he could imagine. The flowers Travis had purchased that evening would end up decorating his house for a dinner party he would hastily organize just to make good on his story. But more importantly, they would be the beginning of a friendship that would test everything Travis thought he knew about love, sacrifice, and what it truly meant to care for another person. Frank Mitchell had spent 52 years loving the same woman, and now he was watching her disappear one memory at a time. Travis Kelce was about to learn what real commitment looked like, and his response would soon capture the attention of the entire world. But first, he needed to visit 1247 Elm Street and meet the woman whose love story was breaking and healing hearts simultaneously. 3 days later, Travis Kelce stood on the front porch of a modest ranch-style house in an older Kansas City neighborhood, holding a bouquet of roses he'd purchased from a florist, and feeling uncharacteristically nervous. The house was well-maintained but clearly showed the care of someone working with limited resources. Fresh paint that had been applied carefully but sparingly, a small garden that was meticulously tended, and windows that sparkled despite their age. Before he could knock, the front door opened, and Frank Mitchell appeared, wearing the same clean white t-shirt and pressed khaki he'd had on under his military jacket at the stadium. "Right on time," Frank said with a smile. "Rose is having one of her good days. She's been excited about meeting you since I told her we were having a visitor." Travis followed Frank into the house, immediately struck by the warmth of the interior. The furniture was older but well cared for, and every surface displayed evidence of a life fully lived together. Wedding photos, military commendation, family portraits spanning decades, and everywhere examples of Rose's watercolor paintings that Frank had mentioned. "Rose, honey," Frank called toward the kitchen. "Our guest is here." A woman appeared in the doorway, and Travis was momentarily taken aback. Despite being in her early 70s, Rose Mitchell retained an elegance that spoke of lifelong grace. Her silver hair was carefully styled, and she wore a floral dress that coordinated with the colors in her painting. But it was her eyes that caught Travis's attention, bright and alert, but with a subtle confusion lurking behind them. "Hello," Rose said, her voice warm but cautious. "Frank told me we were having company, but I'm afraid I don't remember your name." "This is Travis, dear," Frank said gently, moving to stand beside his wife. "The young man I told you about who bought all our flowers." "Oh, yes." Rose's face brightened with recognition. "The flowers! Frank grows the most beautiful flowers. Have you seen our garden?" "I'd love to," Travis said, charmed by her enthusiasm. For the next hour, Frank and Rose gave Travis a tour of their home and garden that revealed the depth of their partnership. The backyard was a masterpiece of careful planning and loving maintenance. Rows of roses, beds of seasonal flowers, and a small greenhouse where Frank started his seedling. Rose pointed out her favorite variety, though Travis noticed she sometimes forgot the names mid-sentence, causing Frank to gently fill in the gaps. "Frank does all the hard work," Rose said, as they admired a particularly stunning rose bush. "I just tell him what colors look pretty together." "She's being modest," Frank said, looking at his wife with obvious affection. Rose designed the entire layout. Took her 3 months of sketching and planning before she'd let me plant the first seed. Inside the greenhouse, Travis saw the care that went into Frank's flower arrangement. The elderly veteran had created a small but efficient operation, cutting table, preservation techniques, and storage for his supplies. It was clearly the work of someone who approached tasks with military precision but artistic sensibility. "Frank," Travis said as they returned to the house, "can I ask how long you've been selling flowers at events?" Frank glanced at Rose, who had become distracted by a bird outside the kitchen window. "About 6 months now. Rose's medications cost about $800 a month that insurance doesn't cover. My pension and Social Security cover our basic expenses, but not the extras she needs." "What kind of extras?" "There's a day program at the senior center that helps with cognitive stimulation, music therapy, art classes, social interaction. It's not covered by insurance, but her doctor says it's important for slowing the progression. Costs $300 a month." Frank's voice remained matter-of-fact, but Travis could hear the weight behind the word. "And there are supplements, special foods, home modifications we'll need to make as she gets worse." Travis noticed Rose had moved to an easel in the corner of the living room, where she was studying an unfinished watercolor painting. "Is she still able to paint?" "Some days," Frank said, following Travis's gaze. "Her motor skills are still mostly there, but she struggles with memory and concentration. Yesterday, she started 3 different paintings and couldn't remember what she was trying to paint in any of them." As if hearing her name, Rose turned around. "Frank, who is this gentleman? Did I already meet him?" Travis watched Frank's face as his wife asked the question she'd asked when he first arrived. There was no frustration, no impatience, just infinite gentleness. "This is Travis, sweetheart. He's interested in your painting." "Oh, wonderful," Rose said, brightening again. "I love showing my work. This one is my garden, or at least it's supposed to. I started it yesterday. I can't quite remember what it was meant to look like." Travis studied the painting, bold strokes of green and pink that suggested flowers and foliage, but lacked the detailed finish of the completed works hanging around the house. "It's beautiful," Travis said honestly. "The colors are incredible." "Frank grows the most beautiful flower," Rose said proudly. "Have you seen our garden?" The repetition of the cycle broke Travis's heart. This woman, who had clearly been vibrant and creative, was trapped in an increasingly small world of recurring moments and lost memory. After Rose excused herself for a nap, Frank and Travis sat on the back porch, looking out at the garden that represented so much of shared life. "How do you do it?" Travis asked quietly. "How do you stay so patient, so positive?" Frank was quiet for a long time, watching a butterfly move among his roses. "Some days, I don't feel very patient," he admitted. "Some days, I want to shake her and demand that she remember our wedding day, or our children's births, or any of the thousands of beautiful moments we've shared." Travis waited, sensing there was more. But then I remember that she didn't choose. This disease is stealing her from me piece by piece, but getting angry at her for having it would be like getting angry at her for having cancer. It's not her fault. Frank's voice grew stronger. And on her good days, when she remembers who I am and laughs at my jokes and tells me she loves me, I remember why I fell in love with her 52 years ago. Do you have children? Grandchildren? Frank's expression grew complicated. We have 2 children. Michael lives in Seattle, works for Microsoft. Sarah is in Denver. She's a teacher. They visit when they can, but they have their own lives, their own family. And honestly, it's hard for them to see their mother like this. Do they help with expenses? They offer, but they have kids in college, mortgages, their own financial pressure. I don't want to burden them with this. Rose and I decided a long time ago that we'd take care of each other, and that's what I intend to do. Travis thought about his own financial situation, the millions he'd earned playing football, the endorsement deals, the investment portfolio that kept growing whether he paid attention to it or not. The amount Frank was struggling to raise each month was less than Travis spent on a single dinner at a high-end restaurant. Frank, Travis said carefully, what if I told you I wanted to help? Not as charity, but as an investment in something beautiful. Frank's back stiffened slightly. Son, I appreciate the thought, but hear me out, Travis interrupted gently. What you're doing for Rose, the way you're caring for her, it's inspiring. And your flowers, your garden, they bring beauty into the world. What if there was a way to help you expand that, to create something that benefits everyone? Frank looked skeptical but curious. I'm thinking about starting a foundation, Travis continued, the idea forming as he spoke, something that supports veterans and their families who are facing medical challenges. You could be our first partner, not a recipient, but a consultant. Help us understand what resources are really needed. I don't understand what you're getting at. Travis took a deep breath. What if we covered Rose's medical expenses and your day-to-day costs, and in exchange, you helped us create a program for other couples in similar situations? You'd be working, contributing, using your experience to help others. Frank studied Travis's face. Serious. Completely serious. Frank, in the 3 hours I've spent with you and Rose, I've learned more about commitment and love than I have in years. That's worth something. That's worth sharing. Before Frank could respond, Rose's voice called from inside the house. Frank! Frank! Where are you? I can't find Frank. Both men immediately stood up and hurried inside, where they found Rose in the living room, looking around with the confusion and fear that Travis was beginning to recognize as part of her condition. I'm right here, sweetheart, Frank said, moving to her side immediately. I was just on the porch with our friend Travis. Travis! Rose looked at Travis, as if seeing him for the first time again. I'm sorry. I don't think we've met. I'm Rose. It's a pleasure to meet you, Rose, Travis said, playing along. Frank was just showing me your beautiful paintings. Oh, I love to paint, Rose said, her anxiety fading. She focused on something familiar. Frank grows the most wonderful flowers for me to paint. Would you like to see our garden? As Frank gently guided his wife through the cycle again, Travis made a decision that would change all their lives. He wasn't going to wait for Frank to accept help. He was going to make it impossible to refuse. But what Travis didn't yet know was that Frank Mitchell was carrying an even heavier secret than the financial burden of Rose's care, a secret that would make Travis's gesture of help both more urgent and more heartbreaking than he could imagine. The flower man who had captured Travis's attention with his quiet dignity was fighting his own battle against time, and the clock was ticking faster than anyone realized. 2 weeks after his first visit to Elm Street, Travis Kelce found himself returning to the Mitchell house 3 times a week, officially to discuss the foundation he was developing, but really because he'd become genuinely invested in Frank and Rose's story. Each visit revealed new layers of their relationship and new insights into what it meant to love someone through impossible circumstances. Today was different, though. Travis had arrived to find Frank sitting alone on the front porch, staring at nothing in particular, while Rose napped inside. Rough day? Travis asked, settling into the chair beside his new friend. Frank nodded slowly. She didn't recognize me this morning. Thought I was an intruder in her house. Took me 2 hours to calm her down enough to convince her I belonged here. Travis had witnessed several of Rose's confused episodes during his visit, but this was the first time Frank had talked about the really difficult moment, the fear, the aggression, the complete erasure of decades of shared life. I'm sorry. That must have been terrifying for both of you. The worst is that in the afternoon, She was fine again, made me lunch, told me jokes, acted like nothing had happened, and I found myself wondering if I'd imagined the whole morning. Frank rubbed his temple. This disease doesn't just steal her memories. It makes me question my own reality sometimes. Travis was quiet, recognizing that Frank needed to talk more than he needed responses. I've been thinking about your foundation idea, Frank continued, and I want you to know how much I appreciate what you're trying to do. But there's something I need to tell you before we go any further. Something in Frank's tone made Travis sit up straighter. What is it? Frank stood up and walked to the porch railing, his back to Travis. 3 months ago, I started having some symptoms. Memory problems, hand tremors, difficulty concentrating. I thought it was just stress from caring for Rose. Travis felt his stomach drop, sensing where this conversation was heading. Last month, I finally saw a doctor, had some tests done. Frank's voice grew quiet. I have early-stage dementia, Travis. Probably the same type Rose has. Genetic predisposition, the doctor said. The words hit Travis like a physical blow. This man, who had become a symbol of unwavering devotion, was facing the same disease that was destroying his wife. How early stage? Travis managed to ask. Maybe 2 to 3 years before I'm where Rose is now. 5 to 7 years before. Frank couldn't finish the sentence. Travis stood up and joined Frank at the railing. Does Rose know? No, and I'm not going to tell her. She has enough confusion without worrying about me, too. Frank turned to face Travis. But you needed to know, because whatever foundation you're planning, whatever help you want to provide, it can't depend on me being clear-headed for very long. The magnitude of the situation was staggering. Frank was caring for a wife who often didn't recognize him while facing the knowledge that he would soon need the same care himself. He was selling flowers on street corners to pay for medications that might slow his wife's decline, while knowing his own decline was inevitable. Frank, what's your plan? I mean, what happens when you can't care for Rose anymore? Frank's composure finally cracked slightly. I don't know. The kids don't know about my diagnosis yet. I can't burden them with both of us. There are facilities, but the good ones cost more than we could ever afford. And the state facility, he shook his head. I won't put Rose in a place where she won't get proper care. Travis felt anger rising, not at Frank, but at a system that could leave two people who had dedicated their lives to service and family facing such an impossible situation. What if money wasn't an issue? Travis asked. What would be the ideal situation for both of you? Frank looked surprised by the question. You mean hypothetically? I mean realistically. Frank, I make more money in one season than most people see in a lifetime. The foundation isn't just an idea. I'm serious about making it happen, and I want to start with you and Rose. So tell me, what would perfect care look like? Frank was quiet for a long time, clearly struggling with accepting such an offer. There's a place called Sunset Gardens, about 20 minutes from here. It's a couples facility for people with memory care needs. They let spouses stay together even as the disease progresses. They have art therapy, music programs, beautiful grounds, and it costs $8,000 a month for both of us. Eventually, Travis did quick math in his head. Even at that rate, he could fund their care for decades without seriously impacting his own financial situation. Frank, what if I told you that Sunset Gardens was an option? Starting immediately? I'd say you're a very generous young man who doesn't understand what he's offering, Frank replied. Travis, we're talking about potentially years of care, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I'm talking about two people who represent everything good about commitment and love. Frank, you've been married for 52 years. You served your country. You've spent your retirement caring for your wife with a dignity that puts the rest of us to shame. If I can't help people like you, what's the point of having money? Before Frank could respond, they heard Rose's voice from inside the house. Frank, where did you put my paints? I want to finish my painting. Cool. Both men smiled despite the emotional weight of their conversation. Rose had been looking for her paints for 2 weeks, unable to remember that Frank had moved them to prevent her from accidentally ingesting the toxic pigment during one of her confused episodes. Coming, sweetheart, Frank called back. He turned to Travis. You should know that accepting your help would mean giving up our independence, admitting that we can't take care of ourselves anymore, or it could mean choosing to focus on what's really important while you still can, Travis countered. Frank, How much time do you and Rose have where you'll both remember loving each other? The question hung in the air between them. Frank's eyes filled with tears that he quickly wiped away. Maybe 6 months where we'll both be mostly ourselves. Maybe less. Then, shouldn't those 6 months be about being together? Not about struggling to pay bills and manage medications? That evening, after Frank had helped Rose find her paints and gotten her settled with a new watercolor project, the three of them sat in the living room while Rose painted and hummed softly to herself. "Travis," she said suddenly, looking up from her easel, "Frank tells me you want to help us move to a new place." Travis glanced at Frank, surprised that he'd already discussed it with her. "I told her this afternoon," Frank explained. "She deserves to be part of the decision." "And what do you think about it, Rose?" Travis asked. Rose considered the question with the careful attention she gave to all important matters during her lucid moment. "I think Frank worries too much about being a burden, and I think you must be a very special person to care about 2 old people you barely know." She paused, adding another brush stroke to her painting. "I also think that I won't remember this conversation tomorrow, but Frank will. So whatever makes him feel like he can take better care of me is probably the right choice." The simple wisdom of her response left both speechless. "There's just one thing I want," Rose continued. "I want to keep painting as long as I can, even if I can't remember what I'm painting or why I'm painting. The act of painting makes me happy." "The art therapy program at Sunset Garden is supposed to be excellent," Travis said. "And Frank, you could keep gardening. They have greenhouse space for residents who want to grow things." Frank looked at his wife, who had returned to her painting with the focused concentration she brought to her art, even as other abilities faded. "All right," Frank said quietly, "but I have conditions." "Name them." "First, this isn't charity. We pay what we can from our income, and the foundation covers the difference as an investment in research or programming or whatever makes it legitimate." Travis nodded. "Agreed." "Second, I want to help design programs for other couples in similar situations. If we're going to be your test, let's make sure we're learning things that can help others." "That's exactly what I was hoping for." "And third," Frank's voice grew stronger, "when the time comes that I can't remember why we're doing this or who you are, I want Rose to have the best care possible, even if it means separating us." This last condition hit Travis hardest of all. Frank was essentially asking him to promise that when Frank's own mind began to fail, Travis would make the difficult decisions that Frank would no longer be capable of making. "I promise," Travis said simply. As they shook hands on the agreement, none of them could have predicted that Frank's timeline was far more compressed than the doctors had estimated, or that Travis was about to become not just a benefactor, but a crucial family member in a story that would soon capture hearts around the world. The foundation Travis was creating would indeed help hundreds of families, but it would begin with 2 people who were teaching him that the greatest love stories aren't about grand gestures. They're about showing up every day, even when the person you love can't remember why that mattered. The video that would change everything started by accident. 17-year-old Maya Rodriguez was volunteering at Sunset Garden when she decided to film what she thought was a sweet moment between Travis Kelce and the elderly couple he'd been visiting. Maya started recording when she heard Travis ask Rose about her painting. "It's supposed to be our garden," Rose said. "Frank grows the most beautiful flowers, but I can't quite remember what they look like anymore." Frank moved closer to Rose's ear and began describing their garden in detail. As he spoke, Rose's brush moved with more confidence, translating his words into watercolor bloom. "The roses along the back fence are deep red," Frank said gently. "Remember how we planted those the year Michael was born?" Rose paused. "Michael, he had such chubby little legs, was learning to walk." As Frank continued describing their garden, Rose's painting came alive with vividness that surprised everyone watching. But what made the video extraordinary was what happened next. Travis suddenly stood up and walked away. Maya followed with her camera, capturing the moment when the NFL star broke down crying behind a tree in the garden. The raw emotion was unlike anything his fans had ever seen. Maya posted the video to TikTok that evening with the caption, "Famous NFL player visits memory care facility and gets emotional watching a couple with Alzheimer's create art together. Travis Kelce, Alzheimer, Jotryun, True Love." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 12 hours, it had reached 2 million views and been shared across every platform. By the next morning, it was trending with Von Schufur, Flower Man, and Rose. Travis's comment on the video made it explode. Frank and Rose Mitchell represent everything beautiful about commitment and love. Their story deserves to be shared. Flower Man and Rose. ESPN ran a feature story. The Today Show wanted interview. Good Morning America prepared a segment about celebrity charity and Alzheimer's awareness. Dr. Elizabeth Santos called Travis personally. That video has generated more awareness about Alzheimer's care in 24 hours than most campaigns achieve in months. Frank and Rose's children called, emotional and grateful. Michael from Seattle. I had no idea Dad's story could help other people like this. Sarah from Denver. The video shows them peaceful in a way I haven't seen in years. Travis addressed criticism during a press conference at the Chiefs facility. Frank and Rose Mitchell didn't ask to become internet famous, he said. I'm not exploiting them. I'm learning from them. 3 months ago, Frank was selling flowers to pay for his wife's medication. If sharing their story helps other families, the attention is. He showed reporters a bank statement. The Frank and Rose Foundation has received over $200,000 in donations since yesterday. Every penny goes to memory care assistance. When asked what he'd learned from them, Travis grew quiet. Frank is showing up every day for a woman who sometimes doesn't remember his name, while facing the same disease himself. Rose creates beauty even when she can't remember what she's creating. That's a level of commitment I'm still learning to understand. The hashtag became a repository for thousands of families sharing their own dementia story. Memory care facilities developed new programs. The conversation shifted from shame to community support. During his next visit, Frank was in the greenhouse, tending seedling. At first, I was embarrassed, he told Travis. Now, I've talked to families who called because they saw our story. A Vietnam veteran whose wife has early Alzheimer's. I could tell him about this place, about facing this disease with dignity. That felt useful. Frank paused. Travis, my progression is faster than expected. Maybe 6 to 8 months before I'm significantly impaired. But knowing Rose will be cared for frees me to focus on what matters, making sure whatever time we have left, we spend being great for 53 years. Rose approached with a painting of Frank in the greenhouse. Look what I painted. It's my husband taking care of his flowers. Isn't he handsome? It's perfect, sweetheart, Frank said, tears in his eyes. You painted exactly what you see. That evening, Travis posted Rose's painting with the caption, some love stories are about showing up in the middle when things are hardest and choosing to see beauty anyway. Flower Man and Rose, Chan Cha, love in the middle. 8 months later, Travis stood in the chapel at Sunset Garden, surrounded by 200 people celebrating Frank and Rose Mitchell's 53rd wedding anniversary. The chapel was decorated with arrangements of roses, carnations, and baby's breath, flowers Frank had grown in his greenhouse and arranged with the same careful attention he'd once brought to his street corner sale. Against all predictions, both were present in every meaningful way. Frank's decline had been slower than expected, attributed to reduced stress, purpose through the foundation, and what Dr. Santos called the powerful effects of love on brain health. Rose, too, had maintained periods of clarity that surprised everyone, often painting for hours with focused concentration that defied her diagnosis. 8 months ago, I thought I was helping a veteran by buying flowers, Travis said from the podium, looking out at faces that had become familiar over the months of foundation work. Frank and Rose were the ones with something to teach. The audience included their children Michael and Sarah, who had flown in from Seattle and Denver respectively, along with grandchildren who were meeting their famous grandfather's friend for the first time. Maya Rodriguez sat with her parents, now regular volunteers at memory care facilities across Kansas City. Dr. Santos was there, along with staff from Sunset Gardens and representatives from Alzheimer's organizations nationwide. 12 other couples from the Frank and Rose program, the Foundation's flagship initiative providing memory care support, occupied the front rows, living proof that Frank and Rose's story had created real change. The Foundation has helped 147 families access memory care. Travis continued, his voice growing stronger as he spoke about the work that had become his passion. But more than that, Frank and Rose have shown us that love doesn't end when memory fades. It finds new ways to express itself. Frank stood slowly in his military dress uniform, carefully preserved and brought out for this special occasion. The medals on his chest caught the light streaming through the chapel's stained glass windows. "Rose and I never expected to become famous for growing old together," he began, his voice carrying the same steady strength Travis remembered from their first meeting. "When that young man bought my flowers, I thought he was just being kind. What I didn't know was that he was about to teach me that accepting help isn't weakness. It's recognizing we're connected." He turned to look at Rose, who sat in her blue dress with a corsage of his homegrown roses pinned to her shoulder. 53 years ago, I promised to love her in sickness and health. This disease taught us that love isn't just the promise you make. It's renewing that choice every day, even when the person doesn't remember why. Frank's voice strengthened as he spoke directly to his wife. "Rose doesn't always remember our wedding or our children's names, but she remembers kindness, beauty, that she is loved. As long as I can remember for both of us, that's enough." Rose stood slowly, her movements careful but determined. The room held its collective breath, wondering if she would be able to speak coherently in front of so many people. "I may not remember yesterday, but I remember love," she said, her voice soft but clear. "I remember this man has cared for me for 53 years, that he grows beautiful flowers, and I remember we're not alone." She gestured to the audience with the same graceful movement she brought to her painting. "You understand that love is work, and work is love. When you plant something beautiful, it grows beyond what you imagine." Travis showed a video message on the chapel's screen from Maria Santo in Phoenix, an elderly Hispanic woman speaking while her husband painted at an easel beside her. "Because of your story, my Roberto paints every day. Yesterday, he painted our first apartment. Details I thought were forgotten forever. Your love story gave us permission to keep loving through this disease. We've received 847 videos like that," Travis said, his voice thick with emotion. 847 families facing dementia with dignity because Frank had courage to sell flowers and Rose had grace to keep painting. Dr. Santos rose to address the group, her medical authority lending weight to the celebration. "From a research perspective, Frank and Rose have shown us that love has measurable effects on brain health. Patients who maintain strong emotional connections often exceed their prognosis significantly. You've contributed to understanding that will help thousands of couples." The ceremony concluded with Frank and Rose renewing their vows in a tradition they had decided to repeat every year for as long as they were both able to participate. Patrick Mahomes, Travis's teammate who had gotten ordained online specifically for this ceremony, officiated with the same precision he brought to reading NFL defenses. "Frank, do you take Rose for whatever time you have remaining?" "I do," Frank said firmly, his military bearing evident even in this tender moment. "For whatever time we have, in whatever way we remember it." "Rose, do you take Frank through whatever comes next?" Rose looked at Frank with complete clarity, her blue eyes bright with recognition and love. "I do. He grows beautiful flowers and has gentle hands. I choose him every day." As they kissed to seal their renewed commitment, sealing their 53rd year of marriage, Travis stepped into the garden where their story had truly begun. The greenhouse was thriving under Frank's guidance, now tended by several residents who had learned his careful techniques. The watercolor studio Rose had inspired had become the facility's most popular activity, with Rose serving as an informal instructor for other patients who found that painting helped them access memories they couldn't retrieve through words. Travis received a text from an unknown number that made him pause. "Mr. Kelce, my name is David Patterson. I'm an Iraq War veteran. My wife was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's at 41. We have 2 kids. Frank and Rose's story showed us we can face this with dignity. Thank you for showing us what's possible." Travis replied immediately, his fingers moving quickly across the screen. "David, call the foundation tomorrow. We'll figure this out together. Nobody faces this alone." As sunset fell over Kansas City, painting the sky in shades that would have inspired Rose's watercolors, Frank and Rose slow danced to music only they could hear, surrounded by family and friends who had learned to celebrate love in all its forms. Their movements were careful but graceful, a lifetime of dancing together, evident in how naturally they moved as one. The Frank and Rose Foundation would eventually help over 10,000 families navigate memory care with dignity. Their programs would become the gold standard nationwide, studied and replicated across the country. But their real legacy lived in the faces of couples who who learned that love doesn't end when memory fades. It finds new ways to bloom, like flowers tended by patient hands in a garden where every season brings its own beauty. Travis had bought flowers from a veteran and discovered a love story that changed his understanding of commitment forever. In a small greenhouse in Kansas City, where an aging veteran still grows flowers and his wife still paints their garden from memory, their love story continues inspiring millions who understand that some flowers bloom most beautifully in life's final season.